The evening rush at Le Blanc restaurant was in full swing. The clink of expensive silverware against fine china mixed with the soft murmur of conversations from well-dressed customers. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the dining room, where a beautiful grand piano sat in the corner, temporarily silent. Among the bustling servers weaving between tables was Lily, a waitress with tired eyes but a genuine smile. At 25, she wasn't much different from other servers, except for the way her gaze kept drifting toward that piano whenever she passed by. "Table 7 needs more bread," called out Tommy, the head waiter, snapping Lily back to reality. She nodded quickly, adjusting the black apron over her crisp white shirt. This was her second shift today. Her feet ached in the mandatory black dress shoes, but the tips from the evening crowd would help with next month's rent. What none of the customers knew, not the businessmen in their tailored suits or the women draped in designer dresses, was that Lily once commanded stages in concert halls. She'd graduated from Juilliard with a master's degree in piano performance, her fingers capable of bringing audiences to tears with Chopin or making them gasp with Liszt. "You okay to handle the corner section?" asked Ming, another waitress, noticing Lily's exhaustion. "Yeah, no problem," Lily replied, tucking a loose strand of hair back into her neat bun. Dad's medical bills aren't going to pay themselves. Life had taken an unexpected turn 2 years ago. Her father's sudden illness had drained their modest savings, forcing Lily to put her musical career on hold. Prestigious auditions and competition opportunities gave way to job applications anywhere that would hire quickly. Le Blanc had been a stroke of luck. The pay was decent, and sometimes she could stay after closing to play the piano when no one was around. "The pianist called in sick," said Mr. Reynolds, the floor manager, stress evident in his voice as he passed Lily with a stack of menus. "Tonight of all nights." Lily glanced at the calendar by the reservation desk. Thursday, when all the regular big spenders came in. The live piano music was part of what they paid for. "Can we get a last-minute replacement?" she asked, but knew the answer from his expression. "Not possible. We'll use the recorded classical playlist instead." As Lily arranged fresh bread in a basket, she calculated the hours she'd need to work to cover next week's hospital bill installment. 6 more shifts, maybe 7 if tips were low. Her shoulders tensed at the thought. "Hey, isn't that him?" Ming whispered, nodding toward the entrance. Lily looked up to see Mr. Reynolds greeting a tall man in an expensive suit. Behind him followed 3 other people, all carrying briefcases and wearing expressions that suggested the dinner was more business than pleasure. "Who?" Lily asked, though she already knew from Ming's nervous glance. "Mr. Harris, the finance guy who made Pam cry last month. He asked for the corner section again." Lily's heart sank. Thomas Harris had a reputation among the staff, demanding, never satisfied, and known for talking down to servers as if they were beneath him. He tipped well, but made sure you suffered for every dollar. And tonight, with no pianist to set the sophisticated mood he expected, he'd be even more difficult. Of course, Lily muttered under her breath, and guess who's serving him? Mr. Reynolds was already gesturing toward Lily, calling her over to greet the important guests. She put on her professional smile, the one that hid everything, her exhaustion, her worries about bills, and the fact that she knew more about the classical music that should be playing than anyone else in the building. As she approached their table, Lily noticed Mr. Harris glancing at the empty piano with a frown. She felt a strange twist in her stomach, like a premonition of something important about to happen. For now, though, she simply pulled out her notepad and greeted them with practiced warmth. "Good evening, welcome to Le Blanc. Can I start you with some drinks tonight?" Little did she know that the empty piano in the corner would soon become the center of a moment that would change everything. Mr. Harris drummed his fingers on the white tablecloth, checking his watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. His guests, 2 men and a woman from Anderson Financial, were busy discussing quarterly reports while Lily poured their water. "We're still waiting on our wine," Mr. Harris said, cutting through their conversation. His voice wasn't particularly loud, but it had that sharp edge that made everyone at the table stop talking. "I'm very sorry, sir," Lily said, maintaining her professional smile. "The sommelier is selecting your bottle personally. It will be just another moment." One of the guests, a kind-faced woman with gray streaked hair, gave Lily a sympathetic look. But Mr. Harris merely huffed and turned back to his companions. As I was saying before we were interrupted, he continued, emphasizing the word in Lily's direction, this merger represents the biggest opportunity our company has seen in a decade. Lily slipped away from the table, exhaling slowly once she was out of sight. The restaurant was unusually busy tonight. With the regular pianist absent, the recorded classical music playing softly through the speakers didn't quite create the same atmosphere. Several customers had already mentioned it to Mr. Reynolds. "Wine for table 12 is ready," called Francisco, the sommelier. His usually calm demeanor seemed strained tonight as he handed Lily a tray with an expensive bottle of Bordeaux and 4 crystal glasses. "Thanks," Lily whispered. "Is it just me, or is everyone extra demanding tonight?" Francisco raised his eyebrows expressively. "It's the music. Live piano sets the mood. Without it, people get restless." Balancing the tray carefully, Lily made her way back to Mr. Harris's table. The conversation had grown louder, with Mr. Harris dominating, describing how he'd secured some important client away from a competitor. "And that's when I told him, you might not appreciate quality now, but you will when your second-rate service starts costing you money." He laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no real warmth. As Lily approached, she noticed the other guests shifting uncomfortably. Mr. Harris was clearly the type who enjoyed an audience, especially when that audience included people who needed something from him. "Your wine, sir," Lily said, placing the bottle on the table. Mr. Harris barely acknowledged her as she began the ritual of presenting the label, uncorking the bottle, and pouring a small amount for him to taste. Instead, he continued his story, making the others at the table wait while he finished. "Where's the bread?" he finally asked, after taking a perfunctory sip and nodding his approval of the wine. "I'll bring it right away, sir," Lily promised, pouring wine for the other guests. "And what happened to the piano player?" Mr. Harris gestured toward the empty instrument. "Part of why I bring clients here is for the ambience. That recorded music sounds like a department store." "I apologize, sir." The pianist called in sick unexpectedly. Mr. Harris's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, that's disappointing. I specifically mentioned when I made the reservation that we'd be discussing an important deal tonight." Lily nodded apologetically and hurried away to get the bread. When she returned, she could feel the tension at the table had increased. Mr. Harris was showing his clients some figures on his tablet, but his jaw was tight, and his earlier ease had been replaced with a clipped tone. As she placed the bread basket down, he looked up at her. "You've been staring at that piano all night," he said suddenly, catching Lily off guard. "Every time you walk by." Lily felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sorry, sir. I just..." "Just what?" he pressed, a hint of something unpleasant in his voice. "I studied music once," she said simply, trying to move the conversation along. "Your appetizers should be out shortly." But Mr. Harris wasn't finished. His eyes followed her as she tried to step away from the table. Something in his expression changed, a calculating look that made Lily's stomach tighten with unease. "Music, huh?" he said, loud enough that nearby diners glanced over. "How interesting." The way he said it, like a cat that had just noticed a mouse, made Lily wish she'd kept that small detail to herself. She hurried back toward the kitchen, suddenly aware that Mr. Harris was watching her every move with newfound interest. And not the good kind. Lily returned to Mr. Harris's table with their appetizers balanced carefully on her tray. The conversation stopped abruptly as she approached. Something in the air had changed. She could feel it immediately. Mr. Harris was leaning back in his chair, a strange smile playing across his face. "Perfect timing," he said, his voice carrying more than necessary. "We were just talking about you." Lily kept her expression neutral as she placed each dish on the table. "I hope everything's to your liking," she said, trying to move the conversation to safer ground. The woman with the gray streaked hair looked uncomfortable. "The food looks wonderful," she offered kindly. But Mr. Harris wasn't finished. He pointed his fork toward the piano in the corner. "I was just telling my associates about how our waitress here is apparently some sort of musician." Nearby tables quieted as people glanced over. Mr. Harris had that effect. His voice commanded attention, whether you wanted to give it or not. "Just a hobby," Lily said softly, wishing she'd never mentioned her background. "A hobby?" Mr. Harris raised his eyebrows. The way you've been looking at that piano all night, I'd say it's more than that. He turned to his guests. Don't you think it's a shame we're stuck listening to this recorded music when we have talent right here? One of the men chuckled nervously. Thomas, maybe we should focus on the proposal. No, Mr. Harris interrupted, raising his hand. I'm curious now. His eyes locked on Lily. How good are you really? Good enough to play that. He nodded toward the grand piano. The restaurant had grown quieter. Lily could feel eyes on her from every direction. Her heart hammered in her chest. I should check on your main courses, she said, trying to step away. Wait, Mr. Harris' command stopped her in her tracks. He looked around the restaurant, seemingly enjoying the attention. I think we deserve some live music with our expensive meal, don't you all agree? A few uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the dining room. Mr. Reynolds appeared suddenly at Lily's side, sensing trouble. Is everything all right here? He asked, his voice professional but tense. Mr. Harris's smile widened. Absolutely. I was just suggesting that your waitress should provide us with some entertainment. She claims to be a musician, and that piano is just sitting there empty. Sir, our staff aren't required to. Mr. Reynolds began, but Mr. Harris cut him off. I understand that, he said, pulling out his wallet. He removed several large bills and placed them on the table. Consider this a special request. $500 says she can't play anything worth listening to. The woman with gray-streaked hair looked mortified. Thomas, this isn't appropriate. It's just a bit of fun, Mr. Harris insisted, but his eyes held something harder. Unless, of course, she was exaggerating about her abilities. Lily stood frozen, her tray clutched against her chest like a shield. $500. That would cover nearly half of next month's hospital bill for her father. Mr. Reynolds leaned close to her. You don't have to do this, he whispered. I can ask him to leave if he keeps pushing. But Lily knew what that meant. Mr. Reynolds risking one of the restaurant's biggest spenders, someone who brought in important clients weekly. She also knew pride when she saw it. Mr. Harris had decided she was lying about her skills, and he wanted to prove it in the most public way possible. Well? Mr. Harris prompted, his voice cutting through the silence that had fallen across the restaurant. Can you play, or was that just talk? My clients and I are waiting to be impressed. The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable. People at nearby tables shifted uncomfortably. A woman at the next table looked down at her plate, embarrassed to be witnessing this scene. The older busboy by the kitchen door shot Lily a sympathetic glance. Lily took a deep breath. 5 years at Juilliard, countless competitions, standing ovations in concert halls, and now this man wanted to use her talent as a joke for his amusement. She placed her tray down carefully on an empty service stand and straightened her shoulders. What would you like to hear? She asked quietly. Mr. Harris's smile widened at Lily's question. He hadn't expected her to accept his challenge. Oh, anything at all, he said with a dismissive wave. Perhaps chopsticks. That's about all I'd expect from restaurant staff. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the dining room. Lily felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her expression calm. Mr. Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder. Lily, you really don't have to do this, he whispered. She gave him a small smile. It's okay, she whispered back. Then louder, so Mr. Harris could hear. I could use the extra money. The woman with gray-streaked hair at Mr. Harris's table looked deeply uncomfortable. Thomas, this has gone far enough. Nonsense, Carol, he interrupted. Everyone loves a little dinner entertainment, and I'm willing to pay handsomely for it. He gestured toward the piano. The stage awaits, unless our waitress is having second thoughts. Lily carefully untied her apron and handed it to Mr. Reynolds. Her heart was pounding, but not entirely from fear or embarrassment. It had been months since she'd played for an audience. Months since her fingers had touched anything nicer than the old upright piano in her tiny apartment. As she walked toward the grand piano, she felt as if she were moving through a dream. The dining room had fallen completely silent. Even the cooks had emerged from the kitchen, standing in the doorway to watch. The older busboy gave her a thumbs up as she passed. Ming, who was serving another table, whispered, "You don't have to do this." But Lily kept walking. With each step toward the piano, she felt something shifting inside her. The embarrassment was fading, replaced by a familiar feeling she hadn't experienced in too long, the calm that came before a performance. She sat down at the bench and adjusted it slightly. The piano was a Steinway Model B, a beautiful instrument worth more than she'd make in years at the restaurant. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, feeling their smooth, cool surfaces. "We're waiting," Mr. Harris called, his voice edged with mock politeness. "Though I understand if you need to warm up." Mary had a little lamb, perhaps. More uncomfortable chuckles from the dining room. Someone at a corner table whispered, "This is painful to watch." Lally took a deep breath and closed her eyes. What should she play? Something simple to get through this humiliation quickly. Or, she thought of her father in the hospital bed, how he'd scraped together every penny to send her to Juilliard. How proud he'd been at her graduation recital. "What are you going to play for us?" called Mr. Harris, impatience creeping into his voice. Lily opened her eyes and looked directly at him. For the first time since she'd approached his table, she didn't feel small. "Chopin," she said simply. "Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. Mr. Harris raised his eyebrows. Ambitious for an amateur, he scoffed, looking at his clients as if they were sharing an inside joke. Lily positioned her hands above the keys. The restaurant was so quiet she could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. A water glass clinked somewhere in the back. Someone coughed. In that moment, she remembered her first piano teacher's words. "When you play, forget everything else. The music is all that matters." She took another deep breath, and then her fingers touched the keys. The first notes filled the restaurant, soft, delicate, like raindrops on a still pond. The melody rose and fell with perfect control. Lally's hands moved with practiced precision, muscle memory taking over as her fingers found each note. Mr. Harris's smug expression flickered. He had expected fumbling, embarrassment, not this confident, professional sound. He straightened in his chair, his brow furrowing slightly. The woman called Carol turned to stare at Lily, a fork frozen midway to her mouth. The other diners had gone completely still, many turning in their seats to watch. As the piece developed, Lily added more emotion, her right hand dancing across the upper keys, while her left provided the steady, complex accompaniment. Years of training flowed through her fingers, the countless hours of practice, the critiques from world-class instructors, the competitions. The music swelled, filling every corner of the restaurant. And Lily, for the first time in months, felt truly herself again. The final notes of the Chopin Nocturne hung in the air like a spell. For a moment, no one in the restaurant moved or spoke. Lily kept her hands poised above the keys, her eyes closed, living in that perfect silence that follows a beautiful performance. Then came the whispers. "That was incredible. Who is she? I've heard professionals who couldn't play like that." Mr. Harris sat frozen, the smug smile completely gone from his face. His clients were staring at Lily with open admiration. Carol, the woman with gray streaked hair, was dabbing at the corner of her eye with her napkin. But Lily wasn't finished. Without pausing to acknowledge the murmurs or see the reaction, she shifted on the bench and began a new piece. This time, her fingers moved with lightning speed as she launched into Liszt's La Campanella, one of the most technically difficult piano pieces ever written. The restaurant fell silent again as the impossibly fast notes tumbled from her fingers. Her hands crossed and leaped across the keyboard, hitting notes that seemed too far apart to reach in the time allowed. The melody rang out clear and bell-like above the complex accompaniment, exactly as the title, "The Little Bell," suggested. Mr. Reynolds stood near the kitchen, his mouth slightly open. The cooks had completely abandoned any pretense of working, crowding in the doorway to watch. Ming was recording with her phone, a huge smile on her face. At Mr. Harris's table, the male clients exchanged glances of astonishment. One mouthed wow to the other. Carol was openly smiling now, occasionally glancing at Mr. Harris with a look that said, "You really stepped in it this time." Mr. Harris himself shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What had begun as an attempt to embarrass someone had transformed into something entirely different. His face flushed red as he realized that everyone in the restaurant knew exactly what he had tried to do and how spectacularly it had backfired. A couple at a nearby table had stood up to get a better view. An older gentleman with white hair was nodding appreciatively, keeping time with his finger like a conductor. Juilliard or Curtis, he whispered to his companion. Has to be. As Lily reached the most difficult part of the piece, her fingers became almost a blur. The music seemed impossible for human hands, yet she played with precision and feeling that showed this wasn't just technical skill, this was artistry. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she neared the finale, but her expression remained serene. This was the world she had lived in before life took its unexpected turn. This was who she really was. The piece built to its conclusion, the notes cascading like a waterfall, faster and more complex until they resolved in a final triumphant chord. This time, the silence lasted only a heartbeat before the restaurant erupted. Applause thundered from every corner. People stood from their tables, clapping enthusiastically. The kitchen staff whistled and cheered. Lily opened her eyes, almost surprised to find herself in the restaurant rather than a concert hall. She stood and gave a small, graceful bow, the same bow she had used after recitals at Juilliard. The applause continued. An elderly woman called out, "Another one, please." Others joined in, encouraging her to play more. Lily glanced toward Mr. Harris's table. His face was a mixture of embarrassment and grudging respect. His clients were applauding with everyone else, Carol standing and clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Mr. Reynolds approached the piano, beaming. "I had no idea," he said, when he could be heard over the applause. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lily smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You hired me to serve food, not play piano." "Well," he said, gesturing to the still applauding crowd, "I think they might want both from you now." A well-dressed man approached from a corner table, pulling a business card from his pocket. "That was extraordinary," he said, handing her the card. "I'm with the City Symphony. We should talk." Lily took the card with trembling fingers, glancing down to see the gold-embossed logo of the prestigious orchestra. And still, the applause continued. The applause finally began to fade as Lily stood by the piano, clutching the symphony director's business card in her hand. She felt lightheaded, as if waking from a dream. For those few minutes playing the piano, she had forgotten everything: the restaurant, the bills, the worries. "One more piece," called someone from the back of the restaurant. Others joined in, urging her to continue. Mr. Reynolds leaned close to her. "Would you mind playing just one more? I've never seen the customers this happy." Lily nodded, still too overwhelmed to speak. As she sat back down at the piano bench, she noticed more phones had come out to record her. A woman near the front was live streaming the performance to someone. Her fingers found the keys again, this time choosing something more personal, Debussy's Clair de Lune. The gentle, dreamy melody floated through the restaurant like moonlight on water. At his table, Mr. Harris watched with a complex expression. The initial shock and embarrassment had faded somewhat, replaced by something harder to define. He'd been publicly proven wrong in the most spectacular way possible. His attempt to belittle someone had instead revealed extraordinary talent. As Lily played, the elderly gentleman who had recognized her training earlier made his way to Mr. Harris's table. He bent down and whispered something. Mr. Harris looked up sharply, then back at Lily with new understanding. The restaurant had transformed. Servers stood still, trays balanced in their hands, unwilling to interrupt the music by moving. Customers who had been ready to leave settled back into their chairs. The chef himself had emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron as he listened. His usual stern expression softened. Through the windows, people walking by on the sidewalk stopped to peer in, drawn by the beautiful music flowing out into the night air. A small crowd gathered outside, watching through the glass. When Lily finished the Debussy piece, the applause was different, not as thunderous as before, but somehow deeper, more respectful. People weren't just impressed by her skill now, they were moved by the music itself. She rose from the piano, feeling oddly calm despite all the attention. Several people approached her immediately, offering business cards, handshakes, and words of praise. "You're that pianist who won the Northeastern competition 3 years ago," said the elderly gentleman. "I was one of the judges. I'd always wondered what happened to you." Mr. Reynolds was practically bouncing with excitement. "Lily, this is amazing. Would you consider playing here regularly? We could work something out." A woman in an elegant black dress touched her arm. "I run the music program at the community college. We need a piano instructor." Overwhelmed, Lily glanced back toward Mr. Harris's table. To her surprise, he was walking toward her, his expression unreadable. The restaurant quieted as people noticed him approaching. He stopped a few feet away, cleared his throat, and pulled out his wallet. Without a word, he counted out $500 bills and placed them on the piano. "A deal's a deal," he said gruffly. That was, he hesitated, seeming to struggle with the words. That was exceptional. Their eyes met for a moment. Lily saw something like respect there, maybe even a hint of shame. "Thank you," she said simply, not touching the money yet. Mr. Harris nodded once, then turned to head back to his table. But he paused and turned back. "My daughter is looking for a piano teacher," he said, his voice quieter now. "She has talent, but no one has been able to keep her interested." He pulled out a business card and placed it atop the money. "If you're interested." As he walked away, Lily looked down at the pile of business cards she'd collected in just a few minutes. Chef Francisco appeared at her side with a glass of water. "Your tables are covered," he said with a smile. "Take a break." She sipped the water, suddenly realizing how thirsty she was. The restaurant had returned somewhat to normal. People were eating again, conversations had resumed, but everything felt different. Ming hurried over, eyes wide with excitement. "Lily, you're all over social media already. Someone posted a video and it's getting shared like crazy." Lily looked around the restaurant that had been just a workplace an hour ago. Now it felt like the beginning of something new. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text message. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out. It was from her father. "The nurse showed me a video of you playing. That's my girl. I always knew you'd find your way back to music." 3 months later, Lily adjusted the flowers on the gleaming black Steinway grand piano. Friday night at Le Blanc restaurant looked very different now. The place was packed, with a line stretching outside. Reservations were booked solid 2 weeks in advance for the evening performances. 5 minutes, Mr. Reynolds said, poking his head through the kitchen doors. He was smiling. He smiled a lot these days. Business had never been better. Lily nodded, smoothing down the front of her simple black dress. No more waitress uniform for her performances, though she still helped serve during lunch shifts 3 days a week. The arrangement worked perfectly. She taught piano at the community college in the mornings, waited tables at lunch, and performed at the restaurant on weekend evenings. "You've got a full house tonight," Ming said, balancing a tray of drinks. "And guess who's sitting at table 12? Lily peeked around the corner and saw Mr. Harris at his usual table. But tonight, he wasn't with business clients. A girl of about 12 sat beside him, watching Lily with curious eyes. "His daughter," Ming whispered. "First time he's brought her." Lily felt a flutter of nerves. In the 3 months since that life-changing night, Mr. Harris had become one of her regular piano students, surprisingly committed to learning despite his busy schedule. He'd never mentioned his daughter again, though Lily knew from their conversations that the girl had struggled with a string of piano teachers. The restaurant lights dimmed slightly. The signal for her performance to begin. She took a deep breath and walked to the piano, the room quieting as she crossed the floor. Applause greeted her before she played a single note. Many faces in the crowd were now familiar, regular visitors who came to hear her play while they dined. In the corner, she spotted the elderly judge from the Northeastern competition, now one of her biggest supporters. He'd helped arrange her first formal recital in years, scheduled for next month at the City Concert Hall. As she sat at the piano bench, her eyes met Mr. Harris. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The tension that had marked their early student-teacher relationship had gradually eased into something like mutual respect. Lily began with Bach, a piece she'd been practicing with her father during her hospital visits. His health had improved enough for him to be moved to a rehabilitation center, where he was making steady progress. The medical bills were still substantial, but between her 3 jobs and the donations from a fundraiser organized by her new friends at the symphony, they were managing. Her fingers danced across the keys, confident and sure. As she played, she thought about how close she had come to giving up music entirely. How one moment of humiliation had somehow brought her full circle back to her true calling. The first piece ended to enthusiastic applause. Lily smiled and nodded her thanks. As she prepared to begin her second selection, she noticed Mr. Harris whispering something to his daughter, who nodded eagerly. Later, after her final piece and a standing ovation, Lily made her way through the crowd of well-wishers to table 12. Mr. Harris stood as she approached. "Wonderful performance," he said, the old arrogance replaced by genuine appreciation. "I'd like you to meet my daughter, Zoe." The girl looked up shyly. "That was amazing. Dad says you're the best teacher he's ever had." Lily raised an eyebrow at Mr. Harris, who actually looked embarrassed. "I may have mentioned that once or twice," he admitted. "Zoe has been asking to hear you play. She's thinking about starting lessons again." "I'd be happy to work with you," Lily told the girl, "if you're interested." "Really?" Zoe's face lit up. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "Actually, there's something else we wanted to discuss. That community music program you mentioned, the one for children who can't afford lessons." Lily nodded. It was a dream project she'd mentioned during one of their lessons, still in the early planning stages. "I'd like to help fund it," he said simply. As a way of, he paused, searching for the right words, giving back. Lily thought of the video that had started everything, the one that had now reached over 3 million views online. The comments section was filled with stories from people inspired to return to abandoned passions or to face their fears. "Sometimes," she said, "the most unexpected moments change everything." Outside, a new crowd was gathering for the late seating, drawn by a video, a story, and the promise of beautiful music in an unexpected place.